One of the things that really amazed me was my first time going through the mill and seeing that log still in the saw and the tools and everything. It's almost like on a Friday afternoon they decided, hey, the work week is done, and they just didn't return.
So it's a time capsule that is extremely valuable because I get to see really how their community was built.
This has been a hidden gem in Norfolk County for so long. It'll be great to throw open the doors and share it with everyone. Delhi started with a Crown grant to Daniel McCall in 1828. And in 1833, McCall sold his interest to Frederick Sovereign. It was originally called Fredericksburg. Frederick Sovereign named it after himself.
But when the railroad comes in, the first postmaster stationed here apparently got annoyed a lot because there was another Fredericksburg up near Ottawa, and so there was a lot of mail that was for that area that would show up here or vice versa. And he convinced the townspeople to rename this town because the other Fredericksburg was apparently older. He settled on Delhi because he was a British nationalist, and the glory of the British Empire was something that he believed in, and the British had colonized India, and apparently Delhi was a beautiful city that was one of the crown jewels of the British Empire. I don't think he'd ever gone to Delhi, but he liked the idea of it, and he was able to convince the local townspeople to rename it, and of course they have to put their own pronunciation on it.
Well, most settlements, early settlements, were established because of a sawmill. They were a requirement because when land was granted to early settlers, they had to clear the land. That was one of the conditions. And so a sawmill played a significant role as they logged all the trees and cleared land so that they could build shelters for their livestock and themselves and their families.
The land where the mill sits was first granted to Daniel McCall in approximately the 1820s. He didn't do a whole lot with the lands at the time. He was told he had to build a mill, but he never actually did.
And in 1833, McCall sold his interest to Frederick Sovereign,
who then gave it to his son, Jacob, again, to build the mill.
From there, the Sovereigns really established the site as a mill and as a industry that they could rely on. That's what brought people to Delhi in the first place. The town as a whole really wasn't much of a community until the mill became established. That was a concept called mill-driven settlement at the time, and that was a concept pushed by the British government, and the whole reason why they allocated mill seats. The Big Creek that runs through Delhi had a mill seat located in where the mill is located now. With that mill seat, it was actually allocated when the surveyors came through, and what they would do is, as they were surveying the lands, they would identify where waterfalls are, where there's dips and valleys and gullies in the river system, so that they could say, hey, this is a great spot for a mill. Let's mark it.
The first mill was a pit sawmill, so it's just a big open hole with two guys on each side that would have these saws going back and forth. But then eventually they built a grist mill out of wood and used the power source of Big Creek, diverted into a pond, which would funnel into what's called an overshot wheel. So the overshot wheel was the power source to the grist mill. And basically a town developed around the mill.
Many communities in Norfolk County were established around a mill. You know, there were mills in Simcoe, Port Rowan, Waterford. They all had mills that changed hands many, many times and had many different names, but were all very important to the establishment of and the sustainability of the communities.
You have to imagine Norfolk looks very different today. It's very agricultural, but it would have been old growth forest at the time. Massive white pine trees that could be 7 feet in diameter. This area was really sought after by the British government to build their navy. And the masts of these warships were largely made from the white pine of Norfolk County. So it was a good business to be in.
From 1820 to 1880, Norfolk County and this entire region had the highest number of mills and the highest employment base in the entire country. The amount of lumber that came out of Norfolk alone is said to have built cities like Cleveland and Chicago because of the massive trees that were coming out of here.
By the 1870s, it starts to tail off a little bit. I think there was like a glut of too many millers, and that's when Jacob Sovereign sells his milling business to the Quance family. So the Quances came, they're also British. They would have settled in Binbrook, which is near Hamilton, and then sort of looking for different new opportunities, came into Norfolk County and bought up milling interests. So he's the one who bought the mills from Jacob Sovereign under the idea that eventually it would go to his oldest son, Peter. Basically, Peter buys him out, and then the younger brother, Robert, comes in 1891, and the two brothers run the business together for many years.
Once the Quances purchased the mill, that's when everything changed drastically. The Quances put in a number of resources, both on manpower and income, and they really transformed the site.
As the Industrial Revolution went on, they were able to source equipment like turbines, steam engines, and add those to their mills, so they weren't always at the mercy of what Big Creek gave them.
So the sawmill, grist mill, and planing mill were all requirements of early settlers because, you know, they logged the trees. It had to be made into lumber, which is where the planing mill came in. They made the boards, and then that built the homes and shelters for livestock.
There's even houses still in Delhi that have doors, windows, sashes, frames, columns, gingerbreading work on their porches from the Quance sawmill and planing mill.
Grist mills, people needed to eat. They were growing wheat early on, and so that needed to be made into flour so that then they could make bread and sustain their families.
Then there was also the woolen mill that was just on the other side of the river, and then there was also the chopping mill, the rye mill, the buckwheat mill. Wherever you looked, there was a building of some kind on the grounds. If it wasn't covered by lumber or covered by a building, there was something there.
It became a really lucrative business during the establishment of the tobacco industry in this area because they provided the lumber for all the tobacco kilns that were built in the lath.
Most of those iconic kilns you see all around Norfolk County, much are dilapidated now, were built with wood from this mill.
The sawmill actually burned in 1913 in March. It was a massive fire that basically destroyed the entire building to the point where there was nothing left. Their fire prevention method was actually barrels of water in the corners of the building. I think it was more so a make you feel warm and fuzzy type of method to fire prevention than anything. But the sawmill was reconstructed and rebuilt, and it was officially reopened in 1916. As time went on, the needs of the community started to shift, because once you get into the 1960s, 1970s, there isn't that need for specialty run timber products because most people are going to Sears, or they're getting their house out of a catalog. Once the 1970s hit, Robert Quance passed away in 1973.
And then his family took over the corporation, but eventually the family and the company looked at lumber and milling. It wasn't profitable. So they decided just to really close up the building, almost intact, like as like a time capsule. So everything that was in there was operating until the day they locked the doors.
In the 1970s, after the Township of Delhi took over the building, there were more so cosmetic renovations that were done to make it suitable for public exploration of the park. Different features being added, different functions being added, like the Kinsman Pavilion, the dam project.
So I don't know where the Quance Park and the Kinsman marriage, how that happened, but it did happen. It was just going to be, hey, let's clean it up event, and then it turned into let's form the banks, cut down trees, and then we took it further. We planted the benches, and then financially contributed to the walking bridge that's there today. I believe it was somewhere around 2004, I read an article in the Delhi News Record that due to the condition of the mill, it was decaying, it was subject to vandalism, and Norfolk County was actually going to destroy it, demolish the mill. And I said, no way, that can't happen. So we took on the task. We raised $150,000, partnered with Norfolk County, and we were able to restore the mill structurally. So it was more structural stuff that we did. New roof, siding, structural support beams, new concrete down the basement. It was a $150,000 project that we were able to do as a small club back in 2005 to 2007, I think is when we finished it. And then the Quance Mill project came to light.
On the main entrance over here,
Right.
we would have to have like an exhibit panel that is an introductory one. And I'm thinking a picture of Joseph Sovereign and a picture of Quance sort of prominent. And then some of the shots, some of these nicer ones of the mill that would be just before it would be shut down in the 1970s.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because this is the sawmill here. That's the boiler in behind, and then this is the planing mill on the other side. So that would be a good one to use.
The idea for the cultural attraction plan is to ready the mill for it to be shared with the community, make it accessible, have tours, education programs. It's a community building, and the community needs to have access to it, and that's what we're working towards.
With the sawmill up at the top of the hill here. So first is really the cultural attraction plan. From there, it's a significant renovation that has to happen to conserve the building, number one.
The exciting part for me as a curator of the Delhi Tobacco Museum is what happens after the building is structurally sound and open. We're going to take all the interpretation planning and exhibit planning that we've done over the years and start creating exhibits. So it's going to be open for tours. It's going to be open for a virtual tour. One of the things that we've had done is a 3D scan of the building, so schools that are interested in historic technologies and the history of Ontario and Norfolk County will be able to take a virtual tour. But overall, when it's done, we want it to be something that people come from all around to come see.
It's a very exciting project. Quance Mill is a designated structure under the Ontario Heritage Act. So we have a moral obligation to conserve it for future generations, but we also have a moral obligation to share it with the community and make it accessible. And that's what this plan is a blueprint to do.
That mill, that is the heart of Delhi. It really is. And the significance, it's the most historic piece of Delhi. Yeah, we have beautiful farms and stuff like that, but from what I understand, that every piece of wood that went into a standard kill came from that mill.
It's not just well, let's do some work and it's done, but it's actually creating a meaningful connection to the community.
Well, it's a beautiful designated heritage mill that has been largely not used to its capability and to its interest to the community. So we're hoping to create a cultural attraction that will bring people from outside of Norfolk County, outside of Ontario, but also to really provide something for Delhi and the county that they can be proud of.
We're all excited. We worked for months on this plan. We think we've thought of everything. We've involved the heritage conservation consultants in this work. We've talked to the public. We know that they want to be inside, and this has been a hidden gem in Norfolk County for so long. It'll be great to throw open the doors and share it with everyone.